Good morning. I hope you're well. Now, it's the 27th of May, and the last few days in the UK have been quite disturbing, and that's because of the media scrum and dogpiling on Dominic Cummings, who is the Prime Minister's chief advisor. Now, I haven't really said too much about this or come down on one side or the other because it's quite a complex situation, really. There's all kinds of different things in play, but I'm coming to some conclusion about what I think about this, and really there's three different things in the mix. Now, the first is this lockdown that we're in, and now we're in the 10th week of a lockdown, and that was all based on the dodgy modelling of Professor Ferguson of Imperial College, who's gone because he was breaking his own rules, and he predicted on the 16th of March, I think, that 510,000 people were going to die because of this Wuhan coronavirus. But then he contradicted himself almost immediately after the government had introduced this draconian coronavirus act and the accompanying guidelines. So as soon as he did that, the government should have just said, well, your advice has changed, so our action is going to change. We're not going to lock down the country anymore because you're saying now, Professor Ferguson, that it's not as serious as you said last week. It's not going to be any more serious than a bad flu season, such as the Hong Kong flu season of 1968, 1969, where about 80,000 people died in the UK. So far, we've had about 60,000 extra deaths over the 5-year average. That's appalling and horrible for those people who have died. Of course it is, and we always need to remember that, but it's not any reason to lock the country down, to destroy civil liberties, and to trash the economy. And that's exactly what the Johnson government has done, because back in March, they were scared into doing it by the mainstream media. And Dominic Cummings was one of the people who advocated for a lockdown and social distancing and all this kind of palaver that we've got going on now. Now, it's clear to me that he didn't break the rules, the letter of the rules, but you could say perhaps he broke the spirit of the rules, and a lot of people who didn't know all of the ins and outs, who didn't read, all the dozens of pages of guidance, would have thought, okay, if I'm in a similar situation to him and you didn't know exactly all of the rules, you might have stayed at home. And now some people are feeling quite perturbed because Dominic Cummings drove up to Durham to be with his family, and a lot of other people weren't sure that they could do that and they stayed at home. So, there was a lot of confusion really about exactly all the ins and outs of the guidance, and now they're going back and saying, okay, well, he didn't break the letter of the rule. I don't know. But it's very clear that there have been other people who did break the letter of the rules, including 4 Labour MPs, as far as I'm aware, and there was no media dogpile onto them, but they're dogpiling onto Dominic Cummings, and I find it quite shocking that a number of Tory MPs are doing the same and joining in the dogpiling with the BBC, with Channel 4, with ITV, with The Guardian, and all these people who would stab them in the back if they had any kind of opportunity. So that doesn't make any sense to me. So that's the first thing. It's quite complicated. The lockdown situation really does need to be released now. We need to get back to normal, not a new normal, which is a new neuro-linguistic programming phrase to try to get us to cage ourselves and obey all kinds of new rules that weren't there before. We need to demand our freedom and our liberty back. Freedom of assembly, freedom of movement for citizens within the kingdom, of course. Freedom of speech, we have that, perhaps in name only, because you have social media giants clamping down on people who have the opposite opinion to the narratives, and it's not just people that have been smeared as way out there, and they're now coming after eminent scientists who don't carry the narrative, who don't agree with the World Health Organization mainstream media narrative. They're now being banned and kicked off platforms. So this is really, really a worrying development, an appalling development. Now, the second thing about this whole thing is Brexit. And if you look into this, I do not agree with Dominic Cummings and his support for the lockdown. I totally disagree with that. But he does support and fight for Brexit. And beyond the whole thing on the surface that this is all about him breaching the spirit of the laws on lockdown, that's really an irrelevance. They're after him because they're after Brexit. And there's a whole panoply of people who wanted to use this lockdown situation, this coronavirus situation, and how it's been fabricated into a mass panic by the mainstream media. There's a lot of people who wanted to use that to extend the transition period. So the UK at the moment is in an 11-month period of vassalage. We left the European Union in name only on January the 31st. Yeah, I went out on the street to celebrate. It was a symbolic day, but we haven't really left its institutions, and we're still in the customs union, we're still in the single market, we still have to obey all the directives and regulations of the Commission and all the rulings of the European Court of Justice, and that's not going to change until the end of the year on the 31st of December. So that's the real day when we really leave the European Union. But we're in what they officially call a transition period, and there's a lot of Ramonas who are now rejoiners. They want to extend the transition period. They want to use this to keep us in the European Union effectively for another 6 months, and then another 6 months, and another year, another year, another year, and so on, until they can get someone in who will take us back in on worse terms than we were in before. That's the game. And that's why they're after Dominic Cummings. That's why they're dogpiling on him. It's not really to do with the lockdown. It's to do with Brexit. And I think all Brexiteers, all conservatives, all libertarians, all lovers of freedom and liberty need to realise this is what the game is about. Because, Boris Johnson won the election in December 2019. So he's in there, and he's in there for another 4 years. And so, whatever political party we're in, if we're in a different one, if we're in the Tory party, whatever, if we're a Brexiteer, that's what we've got. Okay, so that's what we have for the next 4 years. So we've got to work with it, and we've got to keep putting the pressure on the Johnson government to deliver Brexit. But Dominic Cummings is in there, and he is one proper supporter of a full Brexit, I think, as is David Frost, the new chief negotiator. So those are two good appointments by Johnson. Now, I don't agree with a lot of what the Johnson administration has done in the first 6 months, and I'm very clear about that. I don't agree with HS2, which is £100 billion waste of money. I don't agree with their support for Huawei in the 5G network. I mean, that's a different issue to 5G safety and all the high energy microwaves it will use. That's a whole other issue itself. But in terms of security and spying, then, we need to get Huawei out of our telecoms systems. And that's not just 5G, that's the existing systems. 4G, landline systems and communications as well. There's a lot of Huawei equipment which is been installed in all the telephone exchanges for landlines and broadband. No one's talking about that either. We need to remove it from those systems as well. I don't agree with their just talking about immigration but not doing anything about it. So we have a situation now where there are hundreds and hundreds of boats coming across the English Channel, and we've had more illegal immigration across the English Channel in the last month than we had in the whole of the last year. So if it goes on all year, then we're going to have, 10,000, 20,000 illegal immigrants coming in boats across the Channel, and it seems that our border force is escorting them from the edge of British waters up to Dover, and then who knows what happens. Most of the people who get here are allowed to stay at some point in the future, and there's a lot of virtue signalling. Oh, we've got to do something about it. We've got to do something about it. We're having a meeting about it. We're going to talk about it, but nothing is changing. And so they're all talk, but no action. This mass illegal immigration is still going on, and until the boats stop, nothing is changing. So the Johnson administration is all talk, but no action. They're basically letting this continue at the moment. The boats keep on coming. So I don't agree with that. They've got to stop it. And they've got to get us out of the UN Migration Pact, the Barcelona Declaration, the Marrakesh Declaration. And I think also we need to leave the European Convention on Human Rights. That itself is a good convention. The convention itself is good. The problem is you have 70 years of case law from the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. And you've got now increasingly activist judges who interpret the original convention, which is a very good thing, in ways which are progressive, liberal leftist, and so they interpret the convention to say that, illegal immigrants, they have a right to a family life, for example. So if they've got a relative who's already living in the UK, then we can't remove and deport them back to their home if they came here illegally. And so you get all these kind of judgments and rulings made. And so we're not free to control our borders because of the way the European Convention on Human Rights is being interpreted by activist judges. And that also comes down to Tony Blair's Human Rights Act, which compels British judges to make all their judgments in accordance to the European Convention on Human Rights and all of the case law that comes from Strasbourg. So our courts' hands are tied as well. And we also have a problem with our courts and our judges. Increasingly, we're having activist judges in the UK as well as in Strasbourg. That's also a problem that needs to be dealt with. So that's the second thing. So Brexit, and then also all the things that I don't agree with the Johnson administration about. The third thing is we have much more many more important issues going on than what's happening with Dominic Cummings. It's really a distraction from the mass immigration that's happening, as I said, the HS2, the waste of money that the Johnson administration is doing, the business failures. There's so many bankruptcies that are starting to happen because of this lockdown. And now we're starting to see people dying. Death rates are increasing from people who haven't had coronavirus above the 5-year average, because that is not as a result of the coronavirus, but as a result of the lockdown. And the media is completely silent on that. But you can look at the ONS figures, and you can start to see that there's an increase in excess deaths above the 5-year average in people who haven't got coronavirus. Because they haven't been able to get the medical treatment they need. This needs to be dealt with, and all of these are more important issues than Dominic Cummings. So that's what's going on, and That's what we need to deal with at the moment.